Welcome, everybody. It's great to see you all. This is the fourth Liviana conference. I can't believe it. We started in 2020 when we couldn't have a face-to-face conference, and now it's already the fourth time we've had this wonderful Liviana conference starting now and for the next 2 weeks. So welcome to everybody. Wonderful to have you joining from all different parts of the world. It's just a great event to have as many people as we can from the Community Economy Research Network joining together for these moments over the next 2 weeks. So I'm Catherine Gibson. I know many of you, but not all of you. And I'm one of the board members of the Community Economies Institute that is organising this conference. And I'd like to thank all my fellow members of the organising panel for all the work they've put into bringing together an incredible array of sessions over the next 2 weeks that we're going to start off with now. So I'm joining you from Sydney in Australia on the unceded territories of the Darug people of the Eora Nation. And I want to begin by here in place acknowledging and paying my respect to elders past and present, and to particularly acknowledge the valuable contribution that they've made to caring for this country, for its waterways, its coastlines, its plant and animal and human communities over a long period of 60,000 years. It's a real privilege to be living in this space where they've cared for country for so long. And secondly, I want to acknowledge that, this is a pretty bad time of the world at the moment. There's a lot of pain and violence being experienced by people all over the world in conflict zones, but just also in everyday lives. And I think that the need for listening and for love has never been greater. And I just hope that these gatherings that we'll be having over the next 2 weeks as part of this Community Economies Network can provide nourishment and some space to breathe together and to listen and to learn and to support each other to continue working for change. I think we'll be hearing some amazing pieces of work. It will give us a lot of inspiration, but we also need to really support each other in keeping doing this work in these dark times. So it's my really great pleasure to introduce Dr. Njeri Kinyanjui, our first keynote speaker for Liviana 2023. It's a great honour to have you with us, Mary, direct from Kenya tonight or today. Thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to give a few words of background to Mary for those of you who might not know. Mary has a PhD in geography from Cambridge University in the UK and a master's from Kenyatta University in Kenya. She is an independent scholar who has taught. Can you turn off your, excuse me, I think Galina, maybe turn off your mute, or put you on mute. Yeah, thanks. Can hear a few noises in the background. She taught for many years at the University of Nairobi's Institute for Development Studies. And then she's had a whole series of other visiting appointments. In 2022, she served as an activist scholar in residence with the Buchanan Initiative for Peace and Nonviolence at Avila University in Kansas City, Missouri in USA. And in 2021, she taught at the Gender Studies Department at Mount Holyoke College as a visiting lecturer. So we were just down the road from each other, Mary. I was at Harvard in 2022 and teaching in gender studies. It's crazy we didn't get to meet each other then. Mary's also a member of the Diverse Solidarity Economies Collective that many of us know members of. So her research is of particular interest, I think, to all of us, community economy scholars and practitioners. She's worked for many years on women's movements, on the informal economy in Africa, on Ubuntu business models, and how women experience anthropane in their everyday lives. And in 2014, her book, Women and the Informal Economy in Urban Africa, From Margins to the Centre, came out with Bloomsbury Press. So tonight or today, she's going to be talking about humanness and solidarity, Utu Ubuntu, Wanjiku in everyday business and society. And Mary is going to ask the very, very crucial question: can business be done in an Utu Ubuntu method, that is, in a humane way and in solidarity with others? So thank you so much, Mary. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me to give this keynote speech. I first met community economists in a meeting of the American Association in one of the cities in the US, and I was able to attend some of the meetings, but I wasn't very sure about what I was doing then. I also wish to acknowledge the role played by Caroline Hossein of the University of Toronto and the founder of the Diverse Economy for discovering me and incorporating me in the group. I also wish to thank all the women respondents who have answered to my questions and expressed the way they live every day in their business as artisans, as peasants, as domestic workers, and all that. So in this talk, you can see how the women sit around a table discussing in a circle, discussing their affairs. They could be anything like pouring money in roscas, as they are called by Caroline Hossein, or they could be discussing about a funeral, or they could be just praying together, or they could just be chatting or telling each other stories. Next slide. And I'll start by explaining that Ubuntu is a communitarian philosophy which expresses the connection and interdependence of human beings. It's not communism or socialism. It is not about control and domination of human beings by powerful others. It's about equality and egalitarianism among individuals who are connected through blood relationship, language, or neighborhood. BT 1965 expresses Ubuntu, which is a South African term from the Zulu community, as I am because we are, and because we are, therefore I am. That is, you make me and I make you. You build my agency and I build yours. While the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu says that Ubuntu is the interconnectedness of human beings. He says we are inextricably connected to each other. Wherever we are now, we are in a worldwide web where we are connected to each other through so many things in our life. And what affects one affects another. My joy is your joy, and my sadness is your sadness. This means that we should work together in support of each other. We should build communities together without leaving others out. You find that the current economy we have is based on who controls, who has power of the other. But in community, in the economies I've studied, you find that they work together, they hire space together, they secure transport together, and they sit together doing their own thing in their African markets. And I've written this in my book, The African Market, Utu Ubuntu Philosophy. Next slide. So the Africana Utu Ubuntu is based on humanness and solidarity. It's human-centered, emphasizes on placing humanity first over accumulation of goods and services and harnessing profits. For example, one day I ran out of cooking liquefied gas and I went to buy a stove. I was told it would be delivered the next day. I waited for it, but it was not delivered. I decided to go to my sister's place, who lives in an informal settlement, to ask her for a stove because I had nothing to cook. And she called out to the shopkeeper in the neighborhood and asked her, "Can you give us a stove so that my sister can go and cook?" And the lady, without even asking, "When will you pay me?" gave us the cooking stove. She knew that my sister, who was a neighbor, would always pay, and they depend on each other. The other thing about the Utu Ubuntu economy is placing humanity first, means being fair and just in production and sharing of resources. You find that when the market women are working together, they don't undercut each other. If one is not well, the others will trade on her behalf. So you find that in the evenings, they have agreed to pool resources together, whereby these resources will be put in a kitty and used to buy other things or being given to build another individual agency. And solidarity means working with others, from sharing seeds to working on rotational manner on each other farms. It means sharing tasks, transport, security, space. For example, in one market, which is called Uhuru Market, which means freedom, the members held a goat eating party to fundraise, to finance some of the traders to go to China when trade was opened up, to find out what was happening in China. So they always have these meetings where they discuss issues, they discuss how to support each other, and they fundraise. Next slide. The next slide is a graphic representation of this Africana social economy, and I call it a person and the economy. Next slide. If you look at our world economy today, it is in crisis. It is also an economy in transition. As we transit from colonialism to economic liberation, people have been struggling to survive in the midst of the corporates, in the midst of government prosecution, because the government can decide that today this market will not be there and the people are dispersed. So these people, they rely on the divine. They will tell you it's blessings, or they are influenced by physical factors. These three factors influence the individual, and they determine whether they are active or non-active, and the actions they take, which is economic or social. The other thing is that in this kind of economy, prosperity is not measured by the shares that one has or by the voluminous things. It is measured, next slide. It is measured by how one participates in the welfare activities, how they participate in social activities in the community, the contributions they make to family, the contributions they make to the community, and the contributions they make to help each other. So divine relies on, so they experience competition from privileged from form of businesses, and they are penalized without service delivery. If you look at the markets where these people, these women operate, they are dilapidated. They don't have good facilities. So they pay licenses, but they don't get the services they need. So you find that in the market, they will hold fellowships, they will sing and pray, and the songs they sing are songs that give them hope and tell them to keep on moving on because they have nobody to turn to. The next slide. They are also under the physical forces, rain, drought, wind, and fires. And these are very common. If you read about Africa, you always fear floods, drought, wind, and fires. The community also determines these women's participation in community economies. The family provides education and monetary support. When I ask them, where did you get the money from? They'll say, it is my spouse, it's my daughter who was working in Nairobi, it's my brother, it's my uncle. The community also provides ideas, finances, skills, and custom. And outcomes, they are judged by the way they support the family, how they educate their children, housing, animals, food self-sufficiency, participation in community activities such as the church, contribution to funerals, medical bills, contribution to graduation, weddings, and birth ceremonies. So the business is closely embedded in all the ways of life. Economy is about life. So Africana social economy is a way of life. It involves synthesizing lives and livelihoods. You cannot separate the two. The two go hand in hand. It is diverse and inclusive. It doesn't buy each other out, and it is based on the human spirit of radical determination and courage. You find people are so determined to make ends meet. Production goals and surplus are geared towards personal, household, and community goals. It is a creative response to survival and self-actualization. There are no workers and owners of production. Everybody is relying on themselves to do the best they can for life. The next slide. We have seen writings on the Africana social economy in America, and one of them was W.E. Du Bois, who observed that in Durham, he observed group economies in that early 18th century. And these were characterized by preaching, buying and selling, employing and hiring, and even manufacturing. So you find that this was an odd way the African Americans tried to organize themselves in group economies. Next slide. Then there is Jessica Gordon Lambert, who talks about collective courage and the formation of cooperatives among the Black communities. These are producer-owned cooperatives, consumer cooperatives, and work-owned cooperatives. She traces the historical roots of these cooperatives and also discusses things about Black mutual aid societies that were being used to fund services of funerals, food, clothes, and agricultural communities. Next slide. Then there is Caroline Hossein and the community's economies in the global South, and she has collected many chapters in her recent book of Roscas from China, from India to China, to Indonesia, Africa, West Africa, East Africa. And she demonstrates how Roscas bring positive changes to their own lives as well as others. They are found in the global South and in the diaspora. In the West African region, they are known as Susu or Ajo, where people pool money, then loan it or share it with others. In East Africa, we call them Chama, and they evolved from traditional practices known as Guatio, where people would work in a rotational manner in different farms, and then Matega, where they would gift each other depending on the needs of the individual. Next slide. And the Utu Ubuntu economy and neoliberalism, it has been bashed by neoliberals as economies of affection. It has been watered down as a dominant liberating model of development. For the many years I spent at the Institute for Development, we would go to teach these people entrepreneurship. We would tell them that their businesses don't grow, they don't take risks, and they are victims of barriers to growth. But at some point I reached and I found that no, we have to rethink this approach of the way we approach these economies. Goran Hayden is the one who calls, and the World Bank, they call them economies of affection because they are based on human relationship. And she says, for progress to take place, we have to do away with the economies of affection and introduce them to the principles of classical economics. But ordinary people have resisted and articulated the African social economy to the global economy as demonstrated by Mweba rice traders and Githunguri dairy factory in Kenya. In fact, the Mweba rice traders are the ones who made me change my mind about how I approach the study of these women. The Institute for Development Studies was contracted to study collective efficiency. And I was moving around with questionnaires to find out whether there is collective efficiency. Then I arrived at this market called Sega Market in Mombasa, Kenya, at the coast. And I found a group of women seated together, packing rice. And one of them happened to be my high school schoolmate, and she recognized me and told me, weren't we in the same school? Then I said, yes, we were. And she's the one who explained to me how they operate as a market. She told me that the women enter the public domain active and fully functioning. So we should not assume that they are on a book rehearsal of livelihoods. They are active and fully functioning. They come with their song, pain, care, and nurturing, as well as the radical determination and courage to succeed. They come with a sense of community and resistance. They introduce their logic, norms, values, and institutions. They construct their business in environment to be in congruence with their gender. They have an identity to protect, and even dress codes. And the men usually sing for successful women, and they accuse them in songs, and they accuse them of immorality and all that. If you listen to some of the songs, like the one I have put there, Mama Kiwinya and Mama Joro, you find that these women scandalize, these songs scandalize women effort. So in these Moeba rice traders, the rice is individually owned as per person's ability. If you afford 100 kilograms or 100 pounds, then that's your ability. But they'll trade together with the brand name of Moeba. They trade in a romantic Pishori rice, and they ensure that you don't mix this Pishori rice with any other rice. They market the rice together at the Moeba brand. They share the same space, they share transport to bring the rice from upcountry to Mombasa. They set regulations about cleaning, weighing, and packaging and sealing so that they don't spoil their community effort. They also set rules that control their behavior, the behavior of the members. You remember also that when I was doing this research, it was when HIV was very rampant. So the women had to protect themselves from HIV, and that's why they set rules about having your own house instead of sleeping in hotels and all that. Next slide. The Dogori dairy farmers is situated in Githunguri, Kiambu County in Kenya. It was established in 1961 by the one members. They were inspired by the liberation struggle and the achievement of independence from the colonial rule. They were also inspired by the Gikuyu Karenga movement, which was fighting for the incorporation of African values into Western education and not having their values demolished. It also drew inspiration from the Black Empower movement in the USA, which Du Bois and other African Americans were speaking about. Next slide. It has strong values of knowledge, natural resources, and strong social network. It has exhibited anti-colonial values of solidarity, family, and community. Membership is passed from one generation to the next. In 2016, it had 12,293 members. Activities are organized on the basis of ridges whose membership is connected by blood and marriage. Each ridge is headed by a director. The key values are hard work, fairness, and solidarity. Next slide. The dairy has established its own processing plant. It markets its milk under the fresher brand. It evolved from hawking milk in towns and the city of Nairobi to processing. Farmers are paid on the amount of milk they deliver. They are also paid dividends, and they have food stores which they have set. They set rules and regulations on milk hygiene, collection, and preservation. But you find that the neoliberals will tell them that will tell them that having food stores is not economically right. You know, transporting goods is not. Be an entrepreneur and sell your own milk. So the chama, which I told you is in East Africa, that is a neighborhood chama, which started with doing basic things like buying household goods. You know, when structural adjustments were introduced in the 90s, they affected households in a big way. People could not afford utensils. They could not afford food. So what they used to do was pool money, buy each other utensils, buy cooking pots, whatever one was in need, and also buy food in bulk, and then distribute to the members. They later evolved into roscas, where they raised money and shared among members in a rotational manner. They then moved into joint investment, meeting costs of emergencies such as funerals or unexpected members' medical bill, meeting costs of celebrations like graduation, baby shower, and weddings, have resisted and articulated the Utu Ubuntu or African social economy to the global economy as demonstrated by Mwemba rice traders, Githunguri Dairy Factory in Kenya. Next slide. So the Githunguri Dairy Cooperative they are based on the logic of self-reliance, resilience, pooling, sharing, solidarity, and reciprocity. They aim at building individual agency and community capacity. So if you build an individual, you also build capacity. Next slide. Conclusion. This is an overview of the expression of Utu Ubuntu business model in Kenya for the betterment of lives of their communities at the margins of business and society, as well as the retention and propagation of human spirit, of solidarity values and norms in business and society, which are vital today in the face of climate change and global inequality. It's a strategy towards economic and emancipation by being self-reliant and working in solidarity with others. The next.
Njeri, you're on mute.
There is a tab down.
We can hear you now. Yeah.
Can you?
Mary, there's nothing in it. It's just the photo.
No, there is a voice over.
Okay, voice. All right, here.
There is a voice over.
can be compared to the resilience shown
Can you start again?
of the flower in conclusion.
Can you hear it? Were you able to hear it? Can I get a confirmation when I played it
Yeah,
earlier?
we can hear it a little bit. Yeah, let's start from the beginning again.
Okay.
Thanks.
In conclusion, the resilience needed in community economy can be compared to the resilience shown in this short video of the flower
It's dropped out now, prior.
I don't know. It's clear, but
Only
Was
half
that
of it.
a video? Because it's not showing any video. Yeah,
there is
my
a
sc-
voice over.
Yep, just voiceover.
Yeah.
And the voiceover lasted for about half of the time, and then it seemed to fade out.
Yeah, what I was saying is that this flower has grown on concrete, representing the many obstacles that community economies have experienced, and they can grow over that, like the flower that has germinated, grown, and flowered on a concrete floor. So that's what I was saying about this flower, that if you look at it, there is a concrete floor, and the flower, the seed fell, the flower germinated, produced leaves, and finally flowered. So there is hope in community economies, even if we are facing the corporations, the governments, everything. Our resilience is like this flower. So thank you very much.
Was there a last slide with conclusion too? I think it was just there.
It's one. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Mary. That was a wonderful presentation, and I know we'll have lots of questions for you. So while everybody is having a think, they're all clapping. They can see the little hands being put up there to clap. To thank you very much for that great presentation. And now we can just open the floor, I think, for comments and questions, and people could maybe put up their hand, and I'll try and see if I can see everybody at once in the gallery, so we can see who might like to kick off with a question or a comment. Okay, Kelly, would you like to jump in?
Thank you so much, Mary. I really, really enjoyed your talk. And what really stood out to me was that, I guess that not tension, but kind of the harmony between, I think you said it at the end, is building individual agency and community capacity. And then you had that quote at the beginning, I am because we are, therefore I am. And I just found that really quite moving, and also I just feel like it articulates a real different kind of economy. And so, yeah, I didn't really have any question about that, except if you wanted to say a bit more about that interaction between individuals and community, I'd love to hear more about it.
Mary, do you want to make a response now, or would you like to collect more questions?
The individual, the interaction between the individual and community is such that the individual does not stand on their own at the marketplace. You have to have people you share with. For example, when the truckload of tomatoes arrive at the market, the women will share. Each will buy according to their ability. So if we are 10 of us or like 17 of us, some will buy for $100, others will buy for $50, others will buy for $200, others will buy even for $10. So everybody, will share, will participate in buying the tomatoes on the truck. Then you will go and sit down at one place, and you will all sell those tomatoes at the same price without undercutting. If today I'm sick, Placino will stand in for me. He will open the business for me and sell on my behalf. So that is the kind of community they have. The community is enhanced by holding meetings, by going to eat together, and so many things. But if you walk into a market, you won't just discover that. You have to go there repeatedly, talk to them, build trust, to understand their dynamism, because they are not willing to reveal their secrets to everybody. So the way they build, because they are already marginalized and harassed, and they will not trust even the researcher. So some of these things I have come across is because I have built rapport with these people over a long time. And the person who saved me was my classmate. She told me, this questionnaire you are asking us does not help me. Let me tell you the real story of how we work. So they have trust in each other, which they build over time. And because they are marginalized and they know they have a common enemy to fight, they have to work together.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fascinating. I was wondering about whether they all sold the same price, but that's great. Thanks.
A wonderful insight, Mary, into research and research methods and people doing questionnaires in marketplaces, which is what often goes on without any understanding of all the rich networks of relationship that are sitting behind all the people sitting behind their little tomatoes and so on. So really great to get that insight from you. Thank you. Catherine has her hand up, and anyone that has a question further down the track, just remember to put your hand up and I'll call you in. So Catherine.
Thank you. And thanks, Mary, for a really lovely talk. It was wonderful to hear that account. I actually wanted to ask more about that story that you shared where you came across this old classmate and how much that changed your perspective. I'm curious, and I want you to ask you to reflect on how it was that you came to be in a position where you needed that help from the classmate, because I feel like there's something about the way that we train researchers and we train people who are interested in economies that stops them from appreciating what it is that's happening in front of their eyes and in their own places, those really, really important connections. And I'm thinking also about, that language of an economy of affection. I actually hadn't heard about that before. And it's kind of horrifying to think that an economy of affection would be thought to be a bad thing, that people needed to learn how to not have an economy of affection and needed to, to be kind of trained in classical economics. That's such a sad state of affairs. So yeah, I just wanted to ask for your reflections about your own education, I suppose, how it was that you came to be in a position where you knew a lot, obviously, about economies and were there doing a research project, but had not appreciated those the importance of those relational economies that were part of the life of people in your own community?
You see, my process of change was motivated by many things. And first of all, the research methods we use, we come with our own perspectives, develop questionnaires, and then go to confirm them there in the field, or even interview guides. You want the respondents to confirm what you already know. And that one is the mistake researchers make. You want people to confirm your knowledge. You know, like the case I was quoting, collective and efficiency. Schmid of IDS Sussex had come up with a term, collective efficiency, and he wanted it tested in Africa, in India, and other countries. So I was recruited in the research to look whether in Africa, there is collective efficiency. And we had many questions. How does do you work together and all that? And I reached a point where it never made sense, because I've always known that in African economies, we always work together. When I was growing up in the village, we would pick tea together, we would pick coffee together. So I didn't see what was the big deal about this collective efficiency that was supposed to act as the in thing to discovering the African economies. So it's when I went to this lady and she told me, my friend, this questionnaire will not answer what we do here. Let me tell you our story. And she's the one who told me the story. Then when I was building this house, I was relying on informal traders to source materials. So the foreman or the builders would take me to informal settlements to buy the window grills, to buy the timber. And then I would go and I would realize these are places I have been with questionnaires asking questions, but the people I encounter are different. And they tell me a different story. They'll tell me, oh, this timber is from Congo. But with my questionnaire, they'll tell me, oh, this timber is local. Do you import? No, this is local. It is from here. So it's those dynamism that changed. And then my daughter, who was training as a nurse in a community college in America, she sent me a poem which was structured living. And if you look at it in my book, From the Margins to the Center, that poem made me realize that she had observed, she used to part-time on old people's homes. And she realized that there was a close connection between structured living and dementia, but she couldn't explain what it was. So I realized that I have been promoting people to engage in structured livings. Why shouldn't I appreciate the alternatives? Then when I moved to this house, thieves came, attacked me, molested me, and took everything that was in the house. And the things they told me made me realize that it's high time we needed a different economic model that is more inclusive, that is less competitive, that does not alienate individuals. So that's when I started rethinking, how do we promote these alternative economies, make them visible so that World Bank and the rest may see there is hope. The issue of economies of affection, Goran Hayden had spent time here in Kenya and in Tanzania, I think. And then that's when he came to the concept. And I remember very recently, my article was rejected by Antipode because I didn't talk about economies of affection. And I said, I have no time to talk about economies of affection because it doesn't solve, to me, I don't agree with it. I don't agree that these are survivorists. They are not on a book rehearsal or a dress rehearsal for a play. They are living, they are synthesizing lives with livelihoods. And every day they wake up and go to the market with radical courage, fully functioning and ready to embrace their work.
Wonderful. And revealing. Thank you, Mary. There's a lot more, I'm sure a lot more questions coming, and Jenny's got a hand up, so I'll turn over to her.
Great, thanks, Kath. And Mary, thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation that was, so rich with the, the things that you've observed that, are also informed by your own life experiences. And thanks for, that was a wonderful response both to Kat and to Kelly's questions as well. So what struck me when you in particular were answering Kelly's question and you gave the examples of the tomatoes, it seemed like these are such like living economies in the sense that they're economies through practice. This is very much about what people do. And I suspect, and correct me if I'm wrong, that while we can talk about it in terms like reciprocity and resilience and so on, and I suspect that people do have a really strong language to support and sustain their practice, their economic practice, but maybe it's more in song and in storytelling, for example. And maybe as researchers we should be learning to sing and to sit with people and learn people's songs and hear people's stories. And it does make me think about what Kath said right at the beginning about the times in which we're living and the importance of listening and love. And it seems that it's through things like song and storytelling that they're really deep practices of listening and love can often take place across all the sort of differences that we have in the world. So I just wondered if maybe you could talk a bit more about the importance of song and storytelling as a way of enacting or helping people enact the practice and work through the practice of the economies that they're building.
Oh, in fact, that graphical representation that I gave was derived from an analysis of songs. I collected different songs and listened to them, recorded their contents, and looked at what did they say about the economy. So I would develop themes from the songs and came up with that broad framework. I also listened to stories about what was happening. I have a whole range of songs from which I drew those concepts. Yeah. And there were many, like the hard work, like relying on God, like some say kugiginyana, real struggle, you know, and they sing a lot, they dance a lot. The only problem I have is nobody would fund such research, so I have to do it on my own. And then it's tiring and sometimes back-breaking, especially when I have to want to listen to the tapes, subscribe, translate, and then develop the model.
You
Maybe
mentioned
maybe we should have conferences where we sing together.
you mentioned, Mary, there was a song that that was a men's song, I think. That wasn't that women didn't agree with the representation in that song. Was that right? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's a song about this man sings that I had asked for work, but you made me into a lover. Take back your track. I don't need this. What will I tell your children about? So they were singing such things about women who became prosperous, and because they were unmarried, they befriended the young man, and then the young man is telling her, take back your track. I don't need to be there because your children will not speak about me. What will your children say about me?
So I guess there's a gendered nature to some of these songs that need to be kind of exposed as well.
Yeah.
So Zah has a question, has a hand up.
Yeah, good morning from Norway. And Mary, thank you very much for your lecture. I was driving into work and dropping off children and things, so I was not able to see the slides. But the words, I think, were very inspiring and interesting for me, as I'm now going to be starting some new research in Zambia. And I see that your research is in Kenya, and I'm wondering about, Kenya and Zambia are rather far from each other. So if you can talk a little bit about how you feel that your research is useful for other contexts, especially in this case across sub-Saharan Africa.
My research is useful to other parts of sub-Saharan Africa because of the African market is a common feature in most of these cities, and African markets are marginalized. People are trying to transform them, and we need to understand them because they hold the key to food distribution. They hold the key to the voting. These are the women who vote. They are the majority. These are the women who take care of most of the things that we do. We need to, and we need to acknowledge them. We need to identify them. Like the women in Githongori who are dairy farmers, you'll find that the advert for milk will be showing a middle-class family instead of using the ethical model of a woman farming the cattle. So those are the narratives that we need to rewrite about these women who work so hard with baskets of coffee, baskets of tea, bags of cotton, and they are not brought to visibility. They are ignorant persons who should be empowered through neoliberal models. And when they are empowered through neoliberal methods, like giving them sons, I have 2 articles where the women are committing suicide because they cannot pay the loans. So it's something that needs to be rethought about how you approach the study, how you look at the women doing it themselves, how do they organize, and be a good listener. Yeah, be a good listener.
Kath, can I just ask or sort of make a follow-up?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the work that we are starting to do now is to work with women who are collecting wild mushrooms and selling them in the marketplace. And part of the interest is we have 2 local professors that are working with us. One is a health sciences professor, and she also has a lot of experience with midwife activities in villages. And the other one is a social scientist. And so I think it's really helpful for me to be here today. And maybe I can send you an email just to ask if there's specific texts that you've written where we should start, because I'd like to share this material with our research team and our other collaborators who are working now with wild mushroom hunting in sub-Saharan Africa. It's getting a lot of attention, and I think that there's a lot of interest in working with women's communities, but I really want to bring your message about how to do that work in a ethical and thoughtful way. So thank you for your comments.
Right. Do you want to make any more comment, Mary, or should we go to Prior had a question also? Yeah. Okay, Prior.
Hi, Mary. Thank you for a very rich presentation. My question is something related to the member rice traders. You mentioned in your presentation that they also set rules that control their behavior of the members. I was wondering whether, I'd like to invite you to share more about how these members negotiate power relations and difference of positionalities, gender, or age, by giving particular example, context, or event in that regard. And my other question is, you shared about, and thank you for sharing about the humanness aspect of the Utu Ubuntu. But I was wondering whether in one way or another, the cooperative like the Gitanguru dairy cooperative, how does it consider the well-being of the more than human world? So for example, how does the group put into consideration the welfare of the cow, and how the cows themselves in a way become part of the collective that gets in return something from the gains or outputs of the cooperative?
Two questions there, a double one.
The Mwempa rice traders, they'll sit and discuss the rules. They'll sit and discuss the rules that they make. If you find them seated, they'll say, what do we do? They'll write even a constitution to guide them. So they just don't do things in a haphazard manner. They will listen to each other, talk to each other, disagree and agree. And some of the rules they set, they are to safeguard them against further marginalization. Usually, the eldest is given the chairperson's role. The one with Form 4 is given, Form 4 is the secondary education, secretary role. Treasurer is another, somebody who has some education. So they share depending on the specialities, and build each other, tap each other's talents to come up with good leadership. They also want to maintain an identity of who they are. They leave their husbands up country, so they don't want to be seen as being immoral in Mombasa. Mombasa is said to be Mombasa Raha. Raha meaning where you have fun. So these women want to make sure that they are not labeled that way. So that's why they put those rules. I tried to publish that paper on entrepreneurship or gender identity, and I couldn't get a publisher, but later it was published in the Journal of International Small Business and Entrepreneurship. And I was asking, is it entrepreneurship or gender identity? How do they resolve that conflict? Maintaining identity. The humanness in the cooperative is such that they will some will give milk collection sites where neighbors can all aggregate their milk so that the truck comes and collects. They also take care of the animals. They look for feeds. Some of them even buy mattresses for cows. They wash them, clean them. They really take good care of them. And they hire veterinary officers to come and work for them. They ensure that food is good quality. Before a food distributor is authorized to supply feeds to the farmers, they have to be assessed by the farmers themselves. So there's a way they have to deal with lots and lots of issues.
Thank you. Great.
So Mary, I was interested to ask a question. How do these kind of networks and rich kind of connections and supports, how do they manifest in property relations? You mentioned the animals obviously must be owned by families or something, but I'm just wondering, to what extent is property shared, or is it still tied to particular families or particular clans or whatever? And then what happens around kind of intergenerational transfers? I mean, clearly the people don't have a lot of wealth, but do they have property that they hold title to of any kind?
Some have land which they transfer. Some have animals which they share out. Some have shares in the cooperative which they share out. And it usually happens after death. That's when the sharing takes place.
So what's happening between generations then? What happens to the daughters of these women and so on? Do they usually go into the same line of business? Yeah.
Usually, some usually take the mother's business.
Mm.
Yeah, and the father's business.
Mm.
Right now, because things are so difficult, you can't rely on one salary. They will also be doing something on the side, like taking care of animals.
Mm. But you mentioned, people celebrating graduations and so on. Is there a kind of collective strategy to to get one person in the family educated through to high school or beyond high school? Are there strategies to try and move some people into a different sector, for instance, in the economy?
One of the major investment they make is in education.
Mm.
You find if you ask the women how much they spend in education, they'll tell you like 60% they spend on their children's education. So they want to get an education. Once they get an
Whoops, you seem to have frozen there, Mary.
sorry?
Oh, you just froze for a second, just on education. Yeah. I think it's better now. The connection just froze for a minute.
Yeah. They
Yeah,
say
but it's okay now. Yeah. So you were just saying education is very important in terms of expenditure. Yeah. So has anyone else got a question or a comment that they'd like to share? It seems like some of the things you're mentioning, Mary, though, might come up in other sessions throughout Liviana, where we're talking about, you know, the need for different recognition of different kind of models of economy, or certainly the idea of different logics. Because I noticed you used the term logic a few times, as if there, I mean, not so that there are different kinds of logics associated with Ubu and Ubuntu that are very different from the you know, competitive individualistic logic. And I think for us, I think that's a real challenge, is to kind of how we elevate these other relationships and see them as important and as effective and as a world-changing as the so-called, you know, logics of competition that have always been held up as being the drivers of history and so on. So I feel like some of the things you've mentioned will be coming up again in some of the sessions throughout Liviana. And it would be great to kind of pick up on these relationships that you've documented and are really exposing to us here, which I think all of us have been interested as in community economies research as to, you know, the wider language of economy that people use in everyday life and so on. So it's really wonderful to get more of the perspective from your research, and notice that we're developing a much wider vocabulary, hopefully now, across the world of these other kinds of economic realities. But you're still confronting, as I think you've mentioned now, the dominance of a particular economic paradigm, especially when it comes to publication, for instance, and actually arguing the case for a different way of thinking about this sort of thing. But I noticed just recently one of the papers that was circulated around CERN network is by George DiMartino and Eileen Grable and Ian Schoons, who's, you know, been one of the IDS stalwarts for many years, and they're talking about the need for much greater acceptance of uncertainty in economics, for instance, as opposed to certainty. And it seems that that fits a lot with, I think, the kind of broadening of the language of economy towards, you know, reinstating affection as something that's worthwhile, not undermining it. So has anyone else got any other reflections at this point? I think you've given us a lot to think about. I know Catherine McKinnon and I are already, and prior, are involved in some thinking about work that we're embarking on in Papua New Guinea, where we'll be again working with women who are working in the non, you know, in food production, which isn't commodified, like not necessarily sold, but is produced for family use and so on. So I'm sure some of your work will be really helpful and informative to think about approaches that we might take there. would you like to make any other comments, Mary?
Yeah, I'm happy that you invited me and listened to me. I'm happy with the questions. They'll help me sharpen the work. They'll help me look deeper and see what happens. I'm happy to be associated with Rivana, and I wish you good deliberations.
Great, thank you so much. It's wonderful to have this, this community of communication with you. And also I really look forward to seeing more connections with people working based in Africa and working with in Africa and across our network through Asia and Latin America and all over the world. So thanks so much for joining us. And I hope you can come to some of the rest of the Liviana sessions. If they're in a time, then you can make it. It'd be wonderful to see you there. So everybody, thanks a lot for being present at our first session, and look forward to seeing you at some of the others. We've got another wonderful keynote coming up next week with Pieta joining us from Finland. So we look forward to that second. It's a real feast to have someone lay out a wonderful lecture to you. It's just so wonderful to sit and listen and hear all these thoughts that you've been working on for so long. But meanwhile, the rest of us will be participating in different panels and coming together in different collections over the next few days. So looking forward to seeing you all there, and hope you all have a good evening or a good day. And yeah, great to see all your faces. So maybe we'll just all wave and see you next session. Thanks.
Thank you.